In a quiet village cradled by misty mountains, there lived a young man named Ren. He dreamed of building something lasting, a temple, a book, a legacy. But each dream ended where it began, in his mind. He'd start with fire, then doubt would creep in. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? He tried again, quit again, always chasing, never finishing. One evening, after another abandoned plan, Ren climbed the hill to visit the old monk. He poured out his frustration. The monk listened silently, then smiled. "Do you know the bamboo's secret?" Ren shook his head. "It spends years growing roots before it breaks the ground. Nothing seems to happen, but everything is happening." Ren frowned. "So, what do I do?" The monk replied, "Act, not to achieve, but to root." Ren didn't fully understand, but something in the monk's words stayed with him. Maybe the path wasn't about speed or certainty, maybe The next morning, Ren returned to the monk. "I want to act," he said, "but I don't know where to begin." The monk pointed to a small garden behind the temple. "Start there. Pull the weeds." Ren frowned. "That's it?" The monk nodded. So Ren pulled weeds. Every morning. In silence. At first he felt foolish. The task seemed too small, too pointless. But the more he returned, the more he noticed. The way the soil changed when wet, the difference between roots and vines, the rhythm of his own breathing. His mind, once a whirlwind, began to slow. Weeks passed. The garden changed. So did he. One day, the monk watched quietly and said, "You're not just clearing the garden, you're clearing yourself." Ren looked at his hands, dirt under his nails, sweat on his brow. He hadn't built a temple or written a book, but for the first time, he hadn't quit. And that, he realized, was a beginning. Ren kept showing up. Rain or shine, tired or restless, he returned to the garden. One morning he asked the monk, "When will I start building something real?" The monk replied, "You already are." Ren looked around, just soil, weeds, and silence. It didn't feel like much, but something inside him had changed. His thoughts still came, but he no longer followed them. He worked, he stayed, he breathed. Slowly the garden became a mirror. Each root he pulled was a fear removed. Each patch he cleared was a doubt released. One day, without planning it, Ren organized the tools, rebuilt a broken fence, and planted new seeds. No one told him to. It felt natural, effortless. When the monk passed by, he said, "Now you understand. Success isn't something you chase. It's what grows when you stay long enough." And for the first time, Ren believed it. If this story grounds you, subscribe and tap the bell, because maybe your real growth begins the moment you stop running. Months passed. Ren stopped asking when things would happen. He stopped needing proof that he was on the right path. He simply showed up, day after day, and in doing so, something began to shift. He helped rebuild a neighbor's roof. He shared water with a lost traveler. He repaired the temple steps, not out of duty, but presence. One evening, sitting with the monk, Ren said, "I still don't know where this is going." The monk replied, "And yet you go." Ren smiled. It hit him. He no longer needed a clear goal. Purpose had emerged from doing, not thinking. The doubts that once shouted now whispered. He didn't chase them. He let them pass. People in the village began calling him dependable, focused. But Ren didn't care for titles anymore. He had learned the secret. Consistency wasn't about effort. It was about alignment. Doing what called you even when no one sees, especially when no one sees. One morning, Ren stood at the edge of the village, staring at the mountain trail he once feared. It didn't seem smaller, but he felt stronger. He wasn't ready, but he didn't need to be. He packed a small bag and walked. No declaration, no ceremony, just the first step. The climb was rough. Wind pushed against him. Doubts returned. What if this is the wrong path? What if I fail again? But Ren didn't fight the thoughts. He let them speak and kept walking. One step, then another. He remembered the monk's words. Act to root. Each step was a root now. Deeper, steadier. By nightfall, he reached a quiet ridge. Nothing waited there. No sign of success. But he sat, watched the stars, and felt still. He hadn't achieved a goal, but he had stayed. And in that staying, something was changing. Something beyond progress. Something deeper than winning. Something that didn't need to be named. Only lived. The next morning, Ren kept climbing. The trail narrowed, steepened, twisted through rocks. He slipped once, scraped his knee, and sat on a cold stone. Old thoughts returned. You can quit. No one would know. But he didn't argue. He just breathed. Nearby, a bird gathered twigs for a nest. One piece at a time. No urgency. No need for perfection. Just movement. Ren watched, smiled, and stood again. He wasn't chasing anything. He was simply walking. Higher. Slower. Realer. By sunset, he reached the summit. No temple. No prize. Just sky, wind, silence. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. He sat down, not to rest, but to listen. And in that stillness, he finally understood the monk's words. Not as metaphor, but truth. Success wasn't what waited at the top. It was what stayed with you the entire climb. Especially when you kept going through doubt, through fear, through silence. Ren walked down the mountain slowly, not because he was weak, but because he saw clearly. The stones that once tripped him now felt like markers. The wind that once annoyed him now sounded like breath. He paused often, not to rest, but to notice. By the time he returned to the village, nothing had changed. Yet everything had. People asked, "Where did you go?" He simply said, "Up." They waited for stories of challenge, of victory. He offered none. But when they looked into his eyes, they saw calm. He no longer explained. He simply acted, helped rebuild, listened more, judged less. A boy once asked, "How do I become strong?" Ren placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Show up, every day, even when it's hard, especially then." The boy didn't understand but nodded. Ren knew he wouldn't need to explain. Just like the monk hadn't explained to him, presence, not instruction, was the real lesson. Years passed. Ren no longer chased goals. He didn't seek peace. It had rooted in him. He rarely spoke unless silence couldn't say enough. People came to him now, not for answers, but for stillness. One afternoon he returned to the old temple. The monk was gone. The garden was wild again. He sat in the same spot where he once pulled weeds and smiled. It had never been about cleaning the soil. It was about showing up, about learning to stay. The weeds would always return, but so could he. A boy sat beside him. "How do you know if you're on the right path?" Ren didn't answer. He just handed the boy a rake and pointed to the garden. The boy began to work. No words, no promise, just effort. And as the wind moved through the trees, Ren whispered, not to the boy, but to the space around them. Success was never about arrival, it was always about presence. Now ask yourself, are you showing up for your life, or just waiting for the results?